Cognitive Load Theory resource. Cognitive load theory was developed by John Sweller in the 1980s. Sweller explains that cognitive load theory aims to develop instructional design guidelines based on a model of human cognitive architecture. The architecture assumes a limited working memory and an unlimited long-term memory holding cognitive schemas. Expertise exclusively comes from knowledge stored as schemas in long-term memory. As we take information in through our senses, our short-term or working memory processes this new information. Working memory processes two types of basic information: visual information and auditory information. While sounds or sights may reach our ears or eyes, that alone is not enough to cause us to learn. Learning requires us to focus on the information in order for processing to take place. The working memory attends to the information and looks for ways to connect it to the information we already have stored in our long-term memory. The ease or difficulty we experience when processing new information is directly related to what we already know about the topic that is being processed. Long-term memory stores information in schemas. Schemas are like a web of information. Our brain organizes information, ranking it hierarchically and connecting related information. The more information we have in our long-term memory on a subject, the easier it is to add new information into that already existing schema. When we encounter information that doesn't fit into an existing schema, it takes greater effort to add that information into our long-term memory, as we have to build a new schema to account for the new information. Well-developed schemas allow us to automate processes. Automatic processes avoid putting strain on our working memory, freeing up space to process other information. An example of an automated process is driving a car. When you first learn to drive, it takes all of your concentration. After gaining some driving experience, most of the process have become automated. We still respond to our environment and solve problems as they occur, but it doesn't require the same level of cognitive processing that it did when driving was a new experience. Cognitive load theory is built on a model of human cognitive architecture. In 1956, George Miller identified that working memory has a capacity for 7 plus or minus 2 items. By aligning with the cognitive architecture of the human brain, cognitive load theory looks for ways to maximize the effectiveness of working memory in order to move information into long-term memory. Working memory can only attend to about 7 elements of information. However, an element of information can be as small as a letter or number, or as large as a whole schema. Schemas allow us to treat large amounts of information as a single element. For example, imagine that I asked you to look at these letters and then requested that you repeat them back to me in 2 minutes. These letters are each essentially an element of information. In order to remember them and repeat them back in 2 minutes, you will need to do some sort of rehearsing or using a mnemonic device to help you retain the letters in your memory. Now, let's do the same exercise again. Here are your letters. You would be able to easily remember these letters 2 minutes later. Even though the number of letters remained the same, the number of elements is different. You saw the second set of letters as a single element. You had a whole schema that helped you turn 7 letters into a single word. A single word is easier to remember than 7 different elements. If working memory capacity is exceeded while processing information, it will not effectively move information to long-term memory. Sweller looked to identify ways to maximize the effectiveness of the working memory by minimizing the load that it processes as it is encountering new information. Sweller identified 3 types of cognitive load: intrinsic load, extraneous load, and germane load. While processing information will always have a cognitive load, we can influence the overall load by manipulating the 3 types of loads. Intrinsic load is the load that is inherent to the content that is being processed. Intrinsic load can't be changed by changing the way that a content is presented. However, intrinsic load is affected by the prior knowledge of the learner. An expert will be able to process a higher intrinsic load because he already has a robust schema that the new information can be connected to. While you really can't change the intrinsic load, you can manage the load by managing your instructional goals. Two specific examples of managing intrinsic load are provided by Van Mierenboer and Sweller. Intrinsic load can be managed by simple to complex ordering of learning tasks and working from low to high fidelity environments. Extraneous load is the irrelevant material that is included in the design of instructional materials. Extraneous load should be minimized as it distracts the learner from moving information into the long-term storage. Extraneous load can be directly impacted by the instructional materials. Limiting extraneous load should be a goal for all instructional designers. Germane load has to do with encouraging learners to engage in the process of constructing a schema. The germane load can be influenced by instructional design. A designer wants to maximize the germane load. Through research, Sweller identified over a dozen design principles that help instructional designers maximize their germane load and minimize the extraneous load. While cognitive load theory is valuable to instructional designers, no single theory will fully explain the best way to instruct learners. In the end, it comes down to adding cognitive load theory to your toolbox of guidelines. As an instructional designer, you will need to be aware of many different theories and practices. Knowing different approaches, your learners, and their environment allows you to select and implement an appropriate tool for the job.